have Fernando Nicknich on the pod. And he's a composer, a songwriter, and a producer from Brazil. He's got a master's from Berklee, and he's comfortable in both concert, film music, and metal. So welcome. And my first question for you is, are you from a musical family? And what was the role of music in the early years of your life?
Right. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
It's a pleasure to be here. I do come in a way from a family, not of professional musicians, but of amateur musicians. I always had music in some way in my childhood around me, but definitely very far from a professional, thing. I think it's just the love of music that I got from my family.
Yeah.
And that's basically it.
So do your parents play any instruments, or like any family members who play or sing? What inspired the initial love?
Yeah, well, my mother used to play a little bit of acoustic guitar, very basically, not anything sophisticated, but she used to play. I have an uncle as well who loved to play the guitar and sing. Usually they used to sing like folk Brazilian songs. People like to sing as well. My grandmother liked to sing from both sides of the family. When you get together with your family, we could sing songs and things like that. I had piano lessons when I was 8. I think I started. So music theory lessons as well. I got my first steps at that point. And it was really something interesting because I really felt some kind of passion at that time. But as a kid, you really don't know really well how deep you will go into that hole, but
of course
it was an important experience. And I think the real moment when it kind of it changed for me was in my teens when I decided to form a band. So with, school friends and all that story.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. What kind of band?
Yeah, at that time I was becoming interested in bands like Nirvana, Green Day, stuff like that. And later on, I went more into metal. Like we were at the time big fans of Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Metallica, all this classic stuff.
Nice.
So our band was more, we used to play like these classic metal songs. And I started composing at this moment because I was the only member of the band who had some kind of musical background, Yeah. So for me, it was interesting because I think the idea of writing songs kind of got me more than playing itself. So when I reached the point of having to choose a career, I had the feeling, well, I don't know what else can I do besides music. So I want to choose something related to music,
Mm-hmm.
So
how did you get to Berklee?
Well, that's that was crazy. I was like, when I finished my undergrad, I was like completely tired of the academic environment, and people were asking like, are you not going a master's degree? Because I was very, while I was there, I kind of put a lot of energy in the thing, but my undergrad years, I was a very applied student, let's say, but I didn't want to go in an academic path. So I really refused whenever people asked me if I was going to like do a master's degree. I really answered that absolutely no. So,
sure.
But I remember one day I thought like something came in my mind. I thought like, if one day I'm going to do a master's degree or something, it's going to be in the field of film music in a way. I had this thought,
Mm-hmm.
So years later, like 3 or 4 years later, I was here at home and I received, I think it was a mail from Berklee, like saying, well, we have this session, this online session with the program director, if you want to have some information, etc. So I decided to attend. And something really spoke to me like, you should do this, you should try to apply. And so I really couldn't take this voice out of my head. Like I spent like a month saying, who do you think you are? You are not, you are not good enough to be in this course. You are not blah, 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 blah. Lots of
Just talking yourself out of it.
Exactly. So at some point I decided, you know what, I'm going to send my documents and let them decide if I'm not good enough and whatever. Mm-hmm. So it was just, the pieces started to fit, and I really didn't think I was going to be accepted, but I was. So, and it was an amazing year to be there.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk to you about your recording session at Abbey Road Studios. I saw the Lux Eterna video. What was it like conducting there with all those musicians?
Just, it's a fantastic experience.
Yeah,
to see
I've never been
least. There. Yeah, So the first thing that I felt was like, what am I doing here? Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself a conductor. It was really my first experience conducting an orchestra, and my last to date. So you just let them do their work. If you are a good conductor, okay, you have control of the things. But I was really experimenting, trying to to feel the response of the orchestra to the music. And I think the greatest feeling while being there with the orchestra was listening to music, because we usually write stuff in mock-ups, right? Mm-hmm. And we kind of sampling is really different from writing for real instruments, because you can add as many layers as you want, but there you have just, let's say, 4 cellos, and you have to write for 4 cellos and make it sound good. So mm-hmm. It was really interesting to listen to the music, and of course with the best musicians probably in the world. So amazing experience. You really want to go back after you do, once.
Yeah. Could you tell us about that gig? What was the process there?
This was part of the Berklee. It was our final work for the master's, course. So they arranged that for us, for all the students. So we have slots of 18 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, per student. So it was more in the sense of giving us the idea of how it was to be part of that process. And the cool thing is that we've taken care of all the steps of the process, from composing the music, orchestrating, creating the sheet, the
copyist stuff.
Exactly. So then coming into the studio with all the copies that you need and all this stuff. So we took care of all the steps. After the recording, we mixed the music, we mastered, and so on, with the help of Pablo Schuler, at the time the mixing engineer at Berklee. I think he was there as well. But yeah, I don't know if this answered your questions.
It did. Yes. Yeah. That's a great final project to kind of set you up with a real life situation and see how you handle it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you start a beta composition? You've been a beta composer for Soundiron for 4 years now. And do you have a process when you first get sent a library? Like what is your initial start?
Oh, yeah. I always approach composing for like a demo, keeping in mind that I am showcasing some instruments. So because of that, I after some times doing this, I decided to start really checking the instrument, like checking for looking for bugs and stuff like that, because I the first step, I need to understand what sounds I will have at my disposal,
Yeah.
So I just experiment with the instrument. I go taking notes if I find some bugs and stuff like that. And while doing this, if I touch some interesting idea or something, I usually record it already. It happened that it happened to me to have a demo from one of these sketches, but usually I end up with several ideas, in this first step of exploration. I usually don't use most of them, but this is how I like to start. Then I start really improvising. My composition style, if I may say, is very much. I think I use some kind of improvisation in a way, because I'm not the kind of person who sits down with a paper and pen and like think about what I'm going to write. So I like to really go with, I don't know, my imagination or something.
Yeah, it's like a more responsive approach where it's kind of like you're reacting off of what you're hearing and just kind of like having this sort of like internal conversation a little bit.
Exactly. And I like to go with my ear, not as much my mind. Of course, of course, if you understand orchestration, if you understand music theory, whatever, harmony, you tend to avoid some things. You tend to, but it's never a rule. As we said before, since you are working with samples, if you want to, to just put a lot of, I don't know, contrabasses doing crazy stuff in the low register, whatever, you can do it, because there's no limit. But I really like to go, with this exploration, and I start building the track, like adding stuff. I really tend to overwrite. I think I tend to add a lot of stuff in the music. So it sometimes becomes challenge from the mixing point,
Sure.
Yeah, you definitely got to factor in like all that stuff, like where you don't want elements like getting hidden or buried and that sort of thing.
One of my favorite demos of yours was the Elvish Choir Deck the Halls demo. And it's just had these elves going back and forth, and tuba and all sorts of instruments. And it was just very funny, but also very professional sounding. And so like we were cracking up listening to that when we did the Elvish Choir update.
Amazing.
Yeah, you nailed it on that one.
Yeah. And then more recently, you did the Voices of Wind collection. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that process. I heard some drums and some pads, but also these really nice ethereal solo vocals on top of it. So what was your process on that one?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I really remember from the past betas that we've done, one thing that is stuck with me was the demo that I wrote for Voice of Wind Adey.
Yeah.
I remember that one was one of the demos that I just experimented with some piano chords over a phrase that I found in the library. So okay, let me try to like harmonize in a weird way this phrase. And I remember it was like Friday night, and I came back on Monday. So let me listen to what I did on Friday, because I will probably start from scratch again. Probably that was rubbish. And well, I really enjoyed actually what I had done, so I kept it.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite demos. Like some of the piano stuff where there's like these like little like descending piano lines, and just like has a very like dark and kind of like moody sound to it. It's just like a lot of these really cool sort of like do you listen to any like Steven Wilson or anything?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, like I feel like I can kind of hear a little bit of that in there. Like I love that sort of where it sounds very like, it's not like sad. It's just very like
it has strong emotions.
Yeah, just sounds really. Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful and painful at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, in a way. But that library, I really, I mean, all the Voice of Wind libraries, I really enjoyed doing them. But when I came back to write the demo for the collection, I had already this background of having worked with all the libraries, besides the two new voices that we had. So I kind of decided, since it was a collection, I thought I could go back and get some of the stuff I had done already and just build something from that.
Nice.
And yeah, I really don't remember if I had any specific like method or something. I just wanted to go back to the stuff that I had and use that and do something with that.
Do you have a mastering chain that you use every time? Can you tell us about any effects plugins or any like go-to templates you have?
Regarding mastering, I've been using Isotope Ozone, basically. I like to, I've been thinking for a while and experimenting with other plugins instead of just, but Ozone is doing the job for me. I don't consider myself a professional master engineer. So in the sense that I need a lot of stuff I'm more a composer and sometimes a mixing engineer, depending on the project. So if I have to master something, I go to Ozone, and I don't know. I like to think that I'm getting good results out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Broken. What is it? If
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Broken. Yeah, don't fix it. I've been using Ozone. I've been using Ozone since Ozone 4. So I love Ozone too. It's just it's fun to throw it on there and see what it does.
Yeah, especially because they have like the thing where you can just like feed in your track and it'll kind of like, hey, you should probably do these things. And it's great, especially if you're just, like, I just want the track to sound good. I'm not trying to like sit here for 5 hours and like mix every little element. I mean, it's like, of course, being a composer, you sort of have to almost compose a little bit with that kind of mixing in mind, especially if like, okay, like I'm going to be doing these things later on. Like I don't want frequencies or things to step on each other, that sort of thing. But so I guess it helps in that sense, when you're building the track from scratch. But yeah, it's like, if that's not your profession, you just want it to sound good. It's like, hey, if it works, roll with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the assistant part is really interesting in Ozone, because I remember when I was first mastering some track, I mastered some tracks before I got Ozone. And it's funny because I don't remember how I calculated how much compression I would use in the limiter. I did something very intuitively, but when I got Ozone, it was interesting because nowadays everyone we have these loves things. It's pretty easy to if I need a track to be minus 14 loves, okay, you just set the threshold there and it kind of searches for you. But it was not like this. And the assistant in Ozone is very interesting because as Craig said, it kind of shows you a way. I never really go with the result that I get from the assistant, but it's interesting to check what it does. Because sometimes, let's say, if your ear is kind of tired of the material you're working on, you may not be listening to what's really there. Maybe you have, let's say, some excess of mids, excess of low end, or whatever. Usually, the assistant kind of shows you this track. You need to have a cut here. You need to boost your highs and so on. So it helps. In many ways to kind of show you the first steps, but I really like to tweak it. I think always I use the mid side setting to just, I think it's interesting how you can balance your ambience just by using, maybe if you want a track to sound more ambient, you could just make your side of the master a little bit higher, I find it an interesting tool, you know.
Yeah, midside is a really interesting thing. I remember when I first learned about it, it's like one of those things like when you're hearing terms like parallel compression and like stuff like
Exactly.
that. Midside is one of those things too where it's like, ooh, like what's that? Is that some kind of like mixing mysticism I haven't quite discovered yet?
Right.
But yeah, it's really
Magic
cool
that.
because like, you know, you can go in just to the into the sides and just like, you know, carve out low end and have it focus more in the center, or like add a little bit of top end just so it kind of helps kind of widen out the mix and stuff like that. It's a really cool trick when used appropriately. It's like one of those things like using wideners. It's one of those things that some people are like, I don't know.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
if done tastefully, you can get some pretty interesting results, especially using, you know, a widener slightly and mid-side stuff. You can really help create a lot of width. Really cool
Yeah.
trick.
Do you have a reverb that you use a lot?
Recently, Seventh Heaven.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, basically I got it, I think, a year or two ago. So it's been my go-to reverb right now.
Yeah, it's great.
You got any favorite halls that you like to use on there, or different particular rooms, or?
Not really. It really depends on the stuff that I'm mixing, basically, because I don't know. I tend to think it works better with orchestral stuff or like more film oriented music. But depending on what I'm working on, I really experiment with the options that I have. I really don't have a specific, you know, setting, let's say.
Yeah, I always tend to use the large hall. I think I saw Dirk using that one time because he was saying like, oh, you know, because you know, there's a lot like I don't know if it's necessarily the reverb is supposed to model a Bricasti or if there's certain presets on there. But yeah, I remember seeing he's like, oh yeah, use the large hall. Yeah, you can get some really nice results from that plugin. That's a really cool one. Have you used cinematic rooms?
Nope.
Yeah, that's another cool one from Liquid Sonics.
Fernando, what's a personal project you're excited about? Are you working on anything personal, just passion projects?
I should be, but not really at the moment. I have a bunch of songs from my time when I was playing in bands, you know.
Yeah.
Every now and then I think about getting those songs again and doing something with them. I've been one of the things that happened to me as the years went by. I started recording musicians here, local musicians, and mixing their stuff and working. I mean,
Nice.
yeah, more as a mixing engineer and music producer. This was not in the plans, let's say,
Sure.
but it was a cool experience when it started. And well, I started working with other people's music, and this kind of made me think, well, if I'm doing this for these guys, why shouldn't I do for my own compositions, my own songs? So yeah, maybe at some point I might go back and, you know, do something with them, but I'm not doing that right now.
Production, when you're producing for other people's music, there is a lot of composition that goes into it. I know that I've done music with other people and they write the songs, but then you bring the keyboard part or you bring that synth part and or like a drum idea. And so there's a lot of collaboration, but also you are composing. It's just not composing your own music.
That's so true. Yeah. Even in the terms of giving ideas to the recording itself. Well, let's say you have this phrase on the vocals. Why don't you sing like, let's make 2 takes and you put them on stereo? So as a producer, you are giving ideas on how the track will sound in the end.
Yeah.
And this is, in a way, this is composition as well.
Absolutely. So what is a typical day in the life of Fernando right now? What's a day look like, or a regular week look like for you right now?
It really changes a lot because I'm taking lots of projects from the middle of last year to now. I'm getting different projects. And I usually spend like a month like working on a project. And I mean, it depends on the project, but it's really about, I'm not doing anything. Basically, I'm working a lot nowadays. I'm planning to like change this a little bit, but I'm working a lot. And as soon as I finish a project, I go to the next. And yeah, sometimes, since I'm doing different things, sometimes I'm here in my station, like composing and creating something. And sometimes I'm at the studio recording. So it depends really on the project that I'm working on.
Sure.
One thing that becomes difficult at some point is to kind of have a good control maybe of your agenda. Like last week, I got a new project, and cool, but they needed the job done like for this next Friday. So I was already busy, and
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How do you deal with that? Should I not take the project? Should I, so I've been in a way in the middle of this busy schedule, and that's it. Sometimes I spend the weekends with my girlfriend, and that's basically I think she's responsible for having some idle moments in my life, because I was like, very, very busy.
Do you like working at night or in the mornings better? Do you have a preference on that?
I am definitely a night person. If I wait to feel asleep, do you say or feel sleepy? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it happens like at 4 a.m, 5 maybe. So
wow.
I really have to, to be a little bit disciplined, not to, because at the same time, sleeping too late and waking up late in the morning, I feel you don't rest the same way.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the past, like 3, 4, 5 months, I've been trying to, sleep a little bit early and wake up early as well, do something in the morning, but I'm definitely a night person.
How much sleep do you tend to usually get?
Depending as well on the day, but if I sleep, normally probably between 6 to 8 hours, depending on the day. Yeah.
That's good.
Got to get that sleep. Quincy Jones talks about how he loves working after midnight, and that's when his phone doesn't ring and he doesn't get any emails, and he can just focus on being creative and doing the music. So that's similar to what you're saying, is like when everyone else goes to bed, that's when I like to work.
Yeah.
Exactly,
It's funny.
yeah.
It's funny because like you hear that same thing, but reverse with people who like to wake up early. Like I like to wake up at 4 o'clock because, while I'm working, everyone's asleep, and like, and that sort of thing. So, but for some people, you wake up super early and maybe your creativity is not really kicking at that time. Maybe it's like you got to be up and moving for a good chunk of the day before it's sort of the ideas start hitting you.
Yeah.
Right. When you roll out of bed, it's hard to be creative sometimes.
Yeah. You're just trying to walk around and not
get that coffee.
Yeah, you're not trying to run into the wall or fall down the stairs or something. You're just like, you gotta like.
Yeah, but when you start doing music professionally, I think it doesn't matter anymore about now I feel creative. You have a deadline. You have to deliver something. So sit down and do some work. You have
deadlines will reinforce creativity real quick. That is for sure.
Exactly. So yeah.
When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do? Do you have any tricks or hacks on that?
Usually, I think I just go do something else, because usually, one thing that I learned over time is that you should not judge your ideas like in the moment that you are having them. Just let them flow. As I said, when I start composing for a demo, for instance, I have sometimes lots of ideas, and probably I'm going to use 1 or 2 of them only. But if you are too much concerned of like deciding if an idea is good or not right after it's born, maybe you are not allowing the baby to grow up to see what it is, So I don't know. I don't really have this feeling of getting stuck that much anymore. I used to have a lot of this feeling, but I'm getting this approach of just experimenting. Sometimes I write, I go with an idea to a point, and then I decide to start all over, and I start all over with a different idea. That's fine. You just So yeah, but if I'm really stuck, I just give it a little time, and then I come back maybe the next day or something. I go do something else.
Yeah, you talked about resting your ears. That's definitely helpful for me as well. I think you made a great point about not letting the critic part of your brain kick in too quickly, because when you're first sketching out just a loose improvisational ideas, you don't want to be like kicking yourself the whole time. You want to let that take a step back and come back later. And you have kind of the worker bee part of your brain that's just producing ideas, and then you have the boss side of it that is like making the decisions on, is this a good, is this bad? And quality control is important, but you don't want to kick that in too soon.
Yeah, you don't want to have the guy in the back with the machine gun just ready to shoot down every idea that comes your way. You're like, oh, what about this? Oh, what about this? It's like, do you listen to Opeth at all? Or do you know who like Michael Ackerfeld is? Well, Michael Ackerfeld, he does a lot of the main music for Opeth. And he said he just likes to just write ideas. He's like, most of them are shit, but he's like, you have to like go through that to get to the gold kind of thing. And I think it's like, what it's made me think of that, like with what you were saying, how it's like, you just got to get the ideas out there, because as you're just going through those motions, you're like, there's a lot of things that are kicking on, in the background that you might not be aware of. And then, then you come across something, and then that could completely erase everything you just worked on. But that's what you're kind of getting to, like that idea that really like sparks your like excitement. All right, cool, that's it, that's what I've been searching for this whole time. And that's a great point. You just got to keep moving. It's like wanting to do this like big huge album, but you got to put shit in motion, or else it's just nothing's gonna happen.
So what do you like to do in your free time? Do you have any hobbies or interests outside of music?
I like reading. I mean, I'm not doing a lot of this stuff recently, really, but I like reading. As a kid, I enjoyed playing video games, which is something I don't do anymore that much, but I really have this memory like of video games as something cool to do. So sometimes I just open a game and play for a little bit, but you really don't spend that much time nowadays. Adult life, and you have lots of things to do, so you cannot just spend a whole weekend doing something. And of course, watching movies, series, I think these are my main hobbies nowadays.
Totally. What's Brazil like? I've never been to Brazil. Do you have family nearby, or like you do anything outdoors?
Yeah, well, this is the main reason why I'm here, actually. When I finished Berklee, I didn't want to come back to Brazil, mainly because professionally speaking, things here, I think things are more complicated in some ways. So I really wanted to stay in Europe, maybe go into the US at the time, but I had my visa expiring. So I decided, well, I won't stay here, illegally. So I decided to come back to Brazil because my family's here.
Okay.
Basically that's the reason. And how's Brazil? I think it's probably the US is kind of similar. We have many countries in one. If you go to the northeast of Brazil, is one reality. In the south, it's a different reality. And you have, of course, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro. They are, I think, the hubs in terms of artistic production and things like that in Brazil. I am in the south right now. We have a very recent immigration of European immigrants. So that's why my name is German, right? From my mother's side of the family, we are Italians, descendants of Italians. And from my father, we are German. So it resembles a little bit more like the interior of some places in Europe, in the south of Brazil, maybe a little bit like Argentina, which is also more, in a way, an European immigration as well. But yeah, outdoors, it really depends on the part of the country where you are. I am in a city where you can kind of go outdoors without many concerns in terms of, security and things like that. So yeah, it's cool. You should come at some point to visit.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I would like to. I like Brazilian coffee a lot.
Oh yeah.
Do you get any influence from your Brazilian folk music that you were talking about growing up? Would you say that slips into the music that you write?
I would say I don't.
Okay.
Not because I think you inevitably kind of absorb something, from your surroundings. So, for instance, I've never been much into samba and those kinds of Brazilian traditional rhythms. But of course, because you are surrounded by it, I know how it sounds. I understand it. So I know I could write a track. But all my life, I think my interest in rock music and metal music spoke much louder. So I tend to, my musical ideas, my musical mind always lean towards that path. If I'm walking on the streets and I have some melody playing, it's usually a rock riff, a metal riff, or something like that, not this
Traditional
Brazilian folk. Yeah, exactly.
So are you still making metal music? Do you also play guitar, or are you just producing and mixing some metal music?
I'm doing it in the sense of producing for other people nowadays. I play the guitar, not so efficiently anymore because it's been quite a while, since I really took the instrument to. So I like to say I play many instruments, but I'm not a virtuoso in any of them. So
that's composer life for sure.
Exactly. I have a bass guitar here. I have an electric guitar, keyboards, acoustic guitar, and so on. So
you play drums at all, or?
I used to play drums. I was the drummer in my teens when we had that metal band. I was the drummer. But nowadays I just I just sit at the drum to tune, not to play, because you kind of lost your coordination. I think if I wanted to go back and start to play again, it would take maybe a month or so. I would go back. I think I could do it again, but I cannot just sit in the drums. I wouldn't be playing anything if I didn't have some time to rehearse or something,
Yeah, it's great to learn all those different instruments though. Like I remember when I was trying to learn drums, just because my band broke up, and I was like, all right, well, I got to learn how to play drums now so I can write my own music. But it's like, even though, like, for you, since you were a drummer in a band, and you don't do that no more, like, at least when it comes to producing or even like programming drums, I'm sure it's easy to have it up here. Like, maybe it might be a little bit harder to physically make it happen, but it's like, I'm sure if you're like, oh, I need to program this drum part, you have all that of knowing what a drummer does.
You understand the instrument.
Yeah, so it's like,
absolutely,
it's almost like, I'm sure that knowledge didn't go unused, just because there's a lot of people that don't play drums and they try to program drums, and sometimes that
doesn't work.
Doesn't quite work out. Yeah, because they're that octopus thing going on. You're like, I can't hit 4 cymbals and 2 toms at the same time and do this thing on a So
It also depends. It also depends on what you're optimizing for. Because if you're optimizing for composing or producing, then you don't necessarily need to be playing 4 hours of drums a day. You just need to kind of understand what the instrument does and how it's supposed to sound. But like we were talking about Charlie Hunter, who's a guitar player, a really good guitar player, but he also says that he plays drums to a click for an hour a day whenever he's at home and not touring. And like, that's a performer, and he's optimizing for performing, and he wants the best rhythm possible. And so he's focused on just being locked into the groove.
Yeah, he's all about groove.
Yeah, but if you're composing, then it's not important like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and when we are musicians, performers, I don't know. I was listening to 2 albums of a German band named Blind Guardian. You probably. Yeah. So I was the other day paying attention to who produced their albums, and I realized that the 2 albums that I really enjoyed were produced by the same guy. So I was like, you know what? Maybe there's more in the band than just the band. Maybe this producer gave the band a particular sound in this album, and he may have brought in some ideas and so on. So I think the performers usually they probably get lots of ideas from producers and other people as well. Of course, it's not a rule, but it's much more than. At least I like to think. I don't know if this is true or not, but
yeah, I think for those kind of bands, a producer would really come in handy because, like, with a lot of like very like high caliber musician type bands, like there's probably a lot of people that are like, I want to do this thing here. I want to do this thing. There's a lot of just like everyone can probably just solo for the whole album if they wanted to, but you got to have someone who's like, all right, let's not make every song 14 minutes long. Yeah. These giant epic, like Symphony X kind of like the Odyssey or something, that sort of thing. But, just like compacting all that musicianship into something that's more like of a coherent song. So probably a producer has to, come in and condense some parts, maybe not play that thing 12 times or, that sort of thing.
What advice would you give to someone starting out? They want to go to Berklee. They want to do the music for Media Path. What would you say? Like, hey, you got to get your ducks in a row this way.
Oh, that's a difficult question, I think, because I think the paths in your life, in a way, you decide for a plan. You want to go after some planning. You start studying stuff and doing stuff. Let's say film music. I may want to start understanding DAWs, samples, and stuff like that. But also, one thing that I learned is that sometimes you have a name, you have a goal, and things happen around you. Maybe you have something, you may not be called to compose a new soundtrack for a movie, but a band may hire you to record them, for instance. So you're not going to work as a composer, but this is also an interesting experience. So I'd say I'd probably say to be open to the opportunities that are around you, because this is it's a ridiculously big area. We don't have only to know about music. We don't have to know only about orchestration, you have to be able to do everything. Basically, you have to, film music, game music as well. It's not only about writing music, it's about mixing. It's about how, what reverb you choose, what,
it's a wormhole of a profession,
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, if you are good enough, maybe you're lucky enough, you may get good projects that allow you to hire people to do those extra roles that you will need. But you have lots of projects, low budget projects, that you will have to do everything. So I think we have to be open to understand and experiment with all this.
Yeah, being flexible.
Yeah.
I like that.
So for me, it was it happened like this. I wanted to compose, and I really came to a point where I realized that I was not going to get many projects that would allow me to hire other people here where I am, right? So I came to the realization that I should understand a little bit more of mixing my own music. So I went to that side of the spectrum. I was really not an audio guy. I didn't understand. I understood audio theoretically, but not from the point of view of doing something with it. When I was listening to a recording, I was listening to the melodies, the harmonies, the rhythm, but I couldn't understand, although I knew what an equalizer was, a compressor, I couldn't use them in a way that would produce something interesting. And I had to learn this. So I started getting hired to mix amateur musicians, and I went there. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a great learning experience. I mean, to be open to do this kind of stuff, although it was not exactly composing music as I wanted. So you have to be open, I think, and study everything that you can.
Yeah,
like a sponge.
Yeah.
That's a great piece of advice, man. Like, and that's something I've always been a believer in. I think it's like using the concept of throwing out multiple fishing reels. It's always like to think about it like you're gonna catch a fish eventually, but it's like you gotta like try different things, and it keeps it fun too, because it's like it's easy to start sort of like resenting what you want to do when it's not working. and it's very easy to just like quit. Like, you know what, this isn't working, I'm done. But I mean, sometimes it is better to pull the plug on certain things because maybe it might open up time for you to like try something else, that an opportunity that you never knew would end up being your career, but maybe you didn't go into it planning to do that. Let's say like maybe you're a musician and then you start doing video or something, or working for filming for a company or something. Like, you never know how stuff can work out, and that's a great philosophy.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to ask, since you mentioned you're not really on social media, how did you start putting yourself out there and getting gigs and doing composing
and staying busy?
Yeah. How do you go about that?
Yeah, it is really happening locally, I think, nowadays. Because when I came back from Berklee, I had this idea that, wow, now I have this great diploma, and that's so cool. I have an amazing experience recording this amazing orchestra and so on. So I thought at that time that I was going to write to a bunch of people, and some projects were going to come to me, and it didn't happen that way. I was not really, I didn't have a name, I was not known really. So I quickly realized I was not going. This was the part of the story I was mentioning earlier. I realized I was not going to get projects big enough to cover for all the costs that you ideally have in such projects. Mm-hmm. So I started doing some work for local musicians here, most of them really amateur musicians. For me, it was like a big frustration when I started, because why should I be recording this guy who doesn't even know, if I suggest him to play C instead of B in the instrument, he doesn't know where B or C is. I have to tell him, okay, third. So I was very frustrated in the beginning, but then I understood, you know what, this is the guy who is hiring me. So maybe I'm not that good as I think I am. I should just learn with the experience that I'm having here and do the best that I can. That's how it started. And people started looking for me after that. For different projects. In the beginning, I was really recording and mixing musicians. And the good part of being amateur musicians is that I didn't have to, not that I didn't have to deliver good quality stuff, but I had a margin of error. If I did a really bad mix, okay, the guy was not really a professional. So
the stakes were low, right?
Yeah. So for me, it was a great space to learn, and I took advantage of it. And people started calling more and more and more. And this is where I am now. I'm having a good amount of projects. Of course, you are always want to make progress and get bigger projects, more professional projects, and so on. But I'm really enjoying the place where I am and doing what I can. The ideal world is one thing and your reality is another. So sometimes we think that we are just going to have a career if we are in Hollywood doing the next soundtrack for the next Star Wars and things like that. And there is just a limited number of people really doing that, but there are lots of other people doing other types of work. So I try to take this philosophy for me to really do the best I can where I am, and eventually maybe things progress from there.
Yeah, any career in the arts is not linear. There's no perfect stair step of like, okay, it's not like a lawyer where the career is laid out for you, and it's like, okay, if you just do these things for 5 years, you're going to be this here, and then you get this promotion and you get paid this much. Like the arts are very loose, like the stepping stones are far between each other, and you don't really know how the path changes. So I think what you said earlier about being flexible is really important, and just be willing to make a career in music doing lots of different things.
Exactly.
What would you say is the best advice you have been given? Does anything come to mind? It's kind of a big question.
That's a difficult one. I don't know. Maybe to not criticize in a way that,
like too personally.
Yeah, too personally, and yeah, maybe that could be. When I was a student, I usually, if someone decided that, especially a professor or someone who you think should be teaching you something, if someone criticizes your work, when you are talking about arts, you have such a broad range of ideas and different approaches to everything that maybe this person is just showing you their perspective about what you're showing them. But maybe it's just that it's not an objective thing, So maybe this would be the advice, just to keep focused on what you really want to do, because every one of us has a different background, and sometimes you want to just create a mix of whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it's in your head, and those things are in your head and not in the other person's head. So
If you ask 10 different mixers how to mix a track, you're going to get 10 different tracks, right? And same thing
exactly.
with composers. So you kind of have to carve your own path out and your own style out, and it just takes time.
Yeah, especially if who's the person. Like, are they a guitar player? Are they a drummer? Are they a singer?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, those guitars, you should have turned them up a couple dB. It's like, all right, well, I can see that's probably why, because he's or a drummer. It's like, just the drums could just be a little bit louder. Yeah, it's like everything's so subjective. It's just like it's easy to take things personal. I think, especially like in the early days, like you finally go to the studio, record your band, you show your friends. They're like, oh, like you get a lot of people like doing that comparing thing, like, oh, like that sounds like this band, or like, oh, were you guys listening to this? And it's just like, so do you like the song or what? Like, it's like I didn't ask you what does it sound like. You always get people that always kind of say little things like that, but it's always gonna happen.
All right, so I have a few more questions for you, and then we'll wrap this up. Favorite YouTube channel or podcast or TV show at the moment, or something you've been enjoying? Doesn't have to be your all-time favorite, just something you've been watching recently.
Not recently, but the last thing that I think I watched and really stuck with me was Dark, the German TV series.
Oh yeah, it was on Netflix.
Yeah,
I started watching that. It's a little. I think I saw like the first little bit. It's a little kind of a weird show, huh? Like it's pretty.
It is.
Pretty dark.
It's dark,
yeah,
but
like,
it's amazing. I mean, I think, I don't know if this is because they are German, but it's so intense and philosophical content, I would say. Very interesting how they can take those ideas, which are not like just shallow ideas, they are very deep ideas about time. So very interesting how they could put all those dense things in a enjoyable show, enjoyable for maybe not everyone, but yeah. It's interesting how the things proceed from the season one.
I like it. I'll have to check it out. Last question is, what accomplishments or goals do you see yourself achieving in the next few years, or what's next for you?
Probably I will continue doing what I'm doing, but I really am trying to go back to compose more music and produce more of my own stuff rather than working with other people's music, although I really enjoy doing this as well. But I'm just composing less nowadays than I wanted, than I would like.
Yeah, so ramping that up.
Yeah, but I would really enjoy as well, like to live abroad at some point. I don't know, maybe at some point in Europe, someplace in Europe, or even in the US, Canada, I don't know. I would like to maybe move at some point.
Right on, man. Well, Fernando, this was fun, man. We really appreciate your beta compositions. They're great, and we hope that you'll keep them coming. And I hope to hear your original songs at some point. You'll have to send them to us.
Got to hear some of that metal stuff you got working on
Oh
over
yeah.
there.
Absolutely.
I'm all about it. Great to finally talk to you and see you in person, because I know I've been talking to you for a
Yeah,
long time through emails. So yeah, it's cool to chat, dude. Appreciate it.
exactly. I say the same. Very, very nice to be here with you and getting to know you as well personally.
Awesome, man. We will catch you soon. Craig, catch you next week.
All right, Nathan.
All right. Peace.